thank you so much for joining me on the Dallaglio RugbyWorks Talks podcast. We talk to a whole variety of interesting people, and hopefully you will be as interesting, if not more interesting than everybody we've talked to. But it's a very informal conversation, and I cannot thank you enough for coming. For those people that might be listening who don't know you, because obviously you do know yourself, 115 caps for England. I think that makes you the third most cap player of all time.
I think I've been bumped to fourth now, but we'll keep it as third. Keep it as third.
I'm keeping it as third, slipping down the polls on me there. You played in every international tournament. You were a part of the 2014 winning World Cup squad. You're now a coach developer for England Rugby, but you've also climbed Everest.
Yeah, not all the way to the top. We went to Advanced Base Camp, which is about 6,500 meters, to play a game of rugby. Actually, was the aim, to break a world record and to raise lots of money for Wooden Spoon, which is the children's charity.
And you did all of that?
Yes, it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. Altitude is just, it's so unforgiving. It doesn't matter how fit you are, it doesn't matter how prepared you are, you're not at any point prepared or fit enough. So yeah, it was really, really difficult. But I think we raised £500,000 in the end for Wooden Spoon between us as a group. So it was massively worth feeling dreadful every day.
Oh, I can only imagine. I've been to Kathmandu and I've walked up to a nice viewing point where I could see base camp. You know, I've done all of that. I've seen the sunrises, the sunsets. It's absolutely stunning. But playing a game of rugby up there, even at that height, I don't think so. You're feeling it then.
It was, we went on the other side of the mountain, so on the north side, the Tibetan side. So most people come through Kathmandu and that side, but we basically, the other side of the mountain, without being too boring, you can walk further without needing to be able to climb, like without having climbing skills. So the idea was to try and break the world record that was set, I think, on Kilimanjaro. So we needed to get higher than that, but it needed to be a space that you could actually fit a rugby pitch. So it had to tick all the boxes for World Rugby in terms of pitch size, having the lines marked, posts, etc. So we ended up playing that game on a glacier at about 6,350 meters above sea level.
Wow, that is amazing. And how long did you as you came down, did you feel okay again quickly, or did it take you quite a long time to recover?
No, it took ages actually. You definitely feel better as you're going down a little bit lower, and as we made our return journey through base camp. But I reckon I was tired, no joke, for 3 or 4 months when I came back. Yeah, I was like a proper old lady. I'd sit on the sofa in the afternoon and just fall asleep. And I've never been that person. I was never someone who could sleep on a car journey or anything like that. And I was just sleeping all over the place like a cat. So it definitely took something out of me, that's for sure.
Wow. Just an amazing thing to do. Did you play 80 minutes? Was that a requirement, or did you just play?
Good Lord, no. It was a sevens game.
Okay.
So we played, it was actually 2 world records. So we played touch rugby mixed at base camp. So that broke the original record that was at Kilimanjaro. And then we went 2 days walking higher than that. And I actually refereed, so I didn't play in the game because it had to be same gender. So either had to be a men's game or a women's game. We didn't have enough women who were on the trip to be able to make 7-a-side. We actually nearly didn't have enough men because we lost a few people along the way, and we actually had to get 2 Sherpas who were helping us to come and play in the game to make up the numbers to get 14. So I refereed, which, I mean, I mainly stood in the middle of the pitch. I'm not going to lie to anyone. There was not a lot of movement. It was so hard to breathe. We were in a glacier, so there was a massive pile of snow on top of the ice because there'd been a big snowfall. So you were trying to stomp through all of the fresh snow. It was really tough.
Oh, wow. I mean, that just sounds incredible. I mean, what an amazing thing to do for charity, but also what an amazing thing to do to really test yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I underestimated how hard kind of emotionally it would be from you come out of sport thinking, well, I can always control some things, and I know I've trained really hard, so I know that I'll be okay. It's going to be tough, I'm going to feel exhausted, but I'll be okay. And honestly, all that goes out the window with altitude, because it hits everybody differently. One day you feel not too bad, and the next day, like when we first got to base camp, I could, like, my headache was so bad I couldn't even see. We were doing one of our acclimatization walks, and I must have looked awful, because a couple of the boys turned to me and went, are you okay? Because, like, have you eaten anything? Like, they thought I was really low on blood sugar levels or something. But it was just that my headache was so bad, I wanted to just close my eyes and lie down, basically. Which is crazy, because you read all these stories about people who go at altitude and they're nearly at the top, and then they just die. They just lay down and go to sleep. And I've always thought, why would you do that? Like, why would you choose to do that? But you don't choose to do it. It just happens.
Yeah.
I can't describe. You just lose the will to do anything, lay down. Yeah. It's, and to experience that feeling for the first time in my life was also, pretty enlightening, I think, to see how little control actually you do have.
When the chemicals, the oxygen, the levels are completely messed up in your body, and you're just not actually who you are normally. Yeah,
completely. And some really fit people came with us on that tour. Do you want to call it a tour? Well, it wasn't a tour, trip. And they didn't.
It was rugby. It's a tour.
I know, that's what I was thinking. It was not like any tour I've been on before. But they didn't make it. They're still alive. They didn't make it, like, not make it in that way. But it just didn't matter how fit you were. It just, some people were able to get through it and some people weren't.
Wow, what an amazing thing to do. And my opening sort of question was going to be, tell me something about the person behind the rugby. What lights your fire? But I almost feel like you've answered that. So tell me something completely different about the person behind the rugby and what motivates you.
Rugby is such a massive part of my life and has been for a really long time. So if I'm not playing it, I'm coaching it or helping support other coaches. So I always said to myself, I would never have one thing in my life that I did. I would always do lots of things, which I have, Mount Everest being one of those types of things. But it's definitely been pretty all-consuming for quite a long time, and it's still consuming my life as a coach developer and a coach. I like probably to get away from that kind of things. I love the beach. I live quite close to the beach, and just being able to go and pick up pebbles and sea glass. I get a lot of grief for the fact that I like. Do you know what sea glass is?
Oh, I do. I've got sea glass jewellery. I absolutely love it.
Perfect. Well, I might make you a necklace, actually. I went to a sea glass making workshop, so your Christmas present might be coming soon.
Excellent. I can't wait. Well, I'll fit in a birthday before then. I can move it as soon as you like.
Okay. Well, I mean, I need to practice first, but I just love wandering the beach and picking up little bits and pieces. I like to think I'm creative, but I'm more creative in my head, and then actually practically doing it, I'm probably not as good as I'd like to think that I am. I have all these great ideas, but actually, putting them into place and making the thing that I've thought of, I don't always come out quite as it has in my head.
But do you keep going? Do you still make stuff, or are you sort of, it's not perfect, I don't want to do it?
No, I keep doing it. And I actually think probably the longer I've gone on, that's been a really important lesson, because in international sport or elite sport, everything is about being perfect, isn't it? It's about not making any mistakes, doing everything right all the time. And so sometimes when that's not happening in another part of your life, you just like, a bit like the Everest thing. Well, how is this happening? I don't understand. I've practiced, I've trained, I've visualized the sea glass necklace. Why is it not coming out as I wanted? But it's just starting the process again. And I guess when I first started playing rugby, making mistakes wasn't a problem. It was part of learning. And probably as you go through that playing career, because it becomes more and more about performance and outcomes, you end up being a little bit afraid to make mistakes and stuff not being perfect. So it's almost retraining your brain to say, do you know what, that's how we learn, and it's okay, it's just a piece of sea glass. You can find another bit, it's all right.
And you can make lots of different ones, and somebody might love your imperfect sea glass necklace. Somebody sat right here might love it, you know.
Exactly, for the right price. I mean, yes, of course.
And it is amazing the different colours you get. I mean, I like the blues and the turquoises you get in a sea glass, but you suddenly get those reds and different colours. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think there was a bottling factory not far down the coast from here, so there is quite a lot of random bits of glass that will turn up. Some of them are nice, some of them are just basically bits of glass that have just been washed up and down. They haven't quite got those rounded edges.
Yeah,
there is quite a lot around here, which is cool.
Oh, so you've got easy pickings.
Yes, I don't have to search too hard to find some glass.
So when you look at your whole rugby career, which has been absolutely stellar, I mean, whether you've slipped from 3rd to 4th or not, I mean, that is an incredible number of caps for your country. I mean, absolutely outstanding. You know, is it the obvious things that are the highlights for you, winning the World Cup? Is it other things that really stand out in your mind as your memories of your rugby playing career?
Probably a bit of both. I think from what you're striving to do is that performance again and that outcome. So the World Cup in 2014 will always be a huge highlight for loads and loads of reasons, not just that gold medal, but the fact that I played in 2 previous to that and we had lost in the final. So that kind of, you've tried for 8 years to get that gold. So to finally get it then in 2014 was massive, and the work that group of players put in and management staff, there was lots of bit that didn't work, that weren't perfect. Like by no means was everyone in that group friends with each other, which I think is also a really important lesson, that you can still strive and reach the same goal, but you don't have to come out of that everyone being best mates and there never being any challenges within that. And that's been really important. I think sometimes we think that success means everything's been great and we all come out having a party all together, but it was actually the beauty of some of those challenges that meant that we were able to get that win in France. So that's probably, I mean, I'll go on about that forever. I think the 2014 World Cup win.
I mean, because that's what I would have imagined would be your major highlight, but what is fascinating is this element that you do not have to be friends, and actually you can still get a job done, and get a job done superbly at an incredibly high standard. Because I think there is a big emphasis now about liking everybody, and actually not everybody does like each other, but as long as you can respect each other and work together. And did you all have respect for each other, or were there real factions in the team?
No, I think by the end we pretty much got it right. Obviously there was people who were on the bench that wanted to play and people who weren't selected in those final games. That'll always be the case, and you would hope that the people who aren't selected or on the bench think they should be, because you've got to have that, that motivation and that drive as an individual. But I think the bigger picture was it was our time, and that no matter who ended up being the last 15 players on the pitch, it was a collective effort from everybody, and the girls who were left back at home, who had done that whole season of training and they'd done all the training camps, and then at that final selection they weren't there. It was everybody. It was everybody in that had allowed us to get to that position, that had supported each other and challenged each other at training. That meant that final game, that when that whistle went for the 80th minute, it's very cliched, but that group of people couldn't have got there without those other players who weren't actually on the pitch at the time.
Yeah, and I think that's true of so many things. Doesn't matter whether you're pulling off a big event or writing a book. Actually, it's very rare you do something entirely on your own. It is about the collective effort, and often the people who aren't there holding the glory pen at the end aren't remembered. So it's very good of you and very nice to hear that you really acknowledge the role and the impact that they played. Is there a secret little highlight that isn't in the public domain of your career? The little thing that you think, I was 10 and that first rugby ball?
I first started playing rugby because I've got an older brother and he played rugby, and I was an annoying little sister that just wanted to do whatever he did. So followed him around, followed him and his mates around. He didn't want me near him. There's my annoying little sister. But I used to go and watch all his rugby games, and it just looked really cool. It looked like a game that I'd never seen before, in terms of like all the girls' sport, in quotation marks. You weren't allowed to grab the ball off someone. You couldn't make physical contact with them. You know, you had places on the pitch that you had to be, or on the court that you had to be in netball, which I found super restrictive. I was like, well, I want to go over there. I've got the ball. I want to be in that area. So seeing rugby was just like this massive, like, oh my God, it's got everything that I want to be able to do. I want to be able to kick the ball, and I want to be able to grab somebody, and I want all those things. I was like, this is amazing. But I didn't actually properly get the chance to play till I was 15. And that was at Henley Rugby Club. So it was my brother's club, and a women's team joined there. And probably some like the start of that kind of highlights for me was within that group. I was the youngest one within that group of ladies. There was a real mix of experience, from ex-internationals to club players to mums. And it was such a nice community to be a part of as a 16-year-old. I was absolutely terrified for most of it, because I was quite shy. I used to be a really shy little kid. But being amongst a family of women that I could look up to, and Karen Edwards is probably one in that group. She had a kid not whilst we were playing, but during that period of time. And the whole thing just seemed so seamless. She trained when she was pregnant. She stopped at an appropriate time for her. She went off, had a baby, came back. And then, you know, her little one was on the sideline watching. And I just thought, yeah, that's how this should be. This is cool. Why shouldn't you be an amazing athlete, an amazing rugby player, and a mum? And that should be completely normal. And I've probably struggled to find that since, as you go through the levels and it gets more and more serious. It's very difficult for women to have families. It's still difficult now. I know there's a few who are breaking down those barriers and making those changes. But I don't know if that's a highlight, but it's definitely a massive inspiration for me.
Absolutely. And somebody that inspired you to get into the game, stay in the game, and clearly sounds like it's still a role model, even if you haven't followed exactly in the same footsteps.
No, not exactly the same. Didn't have a baby. I didn't mean to imply she had a baby on the pitch, but it felt
that
like
would have been impressive. That would have been seriously impressive. And just out of curiosity, what does your brother think? Because he doesn't have 15 caps for England.
He doesn't, no. So he actually stopped playing when he went to university. He played a bit of rugby league, and then just kind of, as quite a lot of male rugby players do when they get to university, it's maybe not quite the same as it was at school and when they were playing at club. And unfortunately, he was lost to the game, and he was such a talent. He still is such a talented athlete, who'll just pick something up and absolutely, you know, be amazing at it straight away. So we've obviously got good genetics in our family, for me and him. He's been a massive support and was a huge inspiration for why I started playing rugby. So whenever he came to watch me, it was always a really, really special feeling to see him in the crowd and be like, oh, he's come to watch me. Maybe he does think that I'm all right at this rugby thing.
And I expect he's very proud.
I'm sure he is. He should probably tell me more often, I think, but I'm sure.
Absolutely. That's one of the things we can get out of this podcast. Oi, bro. Right. Give us some kudos here.
How great I am.
So, yes, leading nicely on, the men's team have their World Cup this year.
They do.
What are their chances? Come on.
I mean, I can't give you any odds, and they have just lost in the most recent game.
I was there. I was there cheering them on. Obviously wasn't cheering loud enough.
No, you should have been louder. So I would never write England men's team off at any point. There's been a number of World Cups and competitions where we've thought, oh, they're really not performing, but it's almost that kind of that history of that I think has helped to drive them to some of these semi-finals and finals that we thought, oh, they're there. Well done. It's a real big change to have a total change in backroom staff so close to the World Cup. And I know another couple of the men's teams are in similar situations, but we've had such a kind of stable and strong build up to World Cups previously. I think it's probably going to take this Six Nations might be a little bit disrupted while the coaching staff find their feet and the players find their feet within that. I think we've already seen that there's going to be some changes in who those players are, which isn't necessarily a bad thing to have a change up. But I'm hoping that the time that they have together will be enough for them to gel as a group. So I'm not writing them off, I'm afraid. I'm not writing them off.
Okay, good to know. And you're now backroom staff. I like the way you put that. You've got the front room and the back room. You've made that transition. What's it like not being the front room team, but being the back room team? What are the big differences for you in that?
Yeah, I found it, I was talking about this the other day, actually. I found it so hard to start with because I was a player coach for quite a long time. Just fell that way. We didn't have a forwards coach for my club for a number of years. So I ended up kind of being a player coach informally. And then the last couple of years of my playing career, I have officially been a player coach. So I've always been able to feel what it's like on the pitch, which means that from a coaching point of view, I feel like I've had a better insight as to what's going on. I'm quite a kind of emotive, feely type of a person. So I get a vibe. And when you're on the pitch, you're living that. You can get that. You can see who's frustrated. You can see what's going on. And I really struggled when suddenly I was 10 meters away from that, 20 meters, 30 meters. And I was like, I don't know what the feeling is. I don't know who's stressed, that kind of connecting with individual people on the pitch. I felt like when I was on it, I could do that. I knew what was going on. So it's still a work in progress. I'm still trying to make sure that I get to know those individuals so that I can read the signs. I can see how that's going on the pitch for them to maybe be able to either give them a little bit more support if they need it, or if I can see that they're over anxious or they're over excited, to maybe be able to have that conversation to just get them to breathe and to just calm down. But it's tough, and I'm still not the finished product, I'm afraid, with that. But that was probably the biggest thing for me, was feeling like I didn't have that control and that connection. And
I think there are a lot of similarities there with, certainly my own background in businesses and having started things, and you work really closely alongside people and you're in and out of each other's pockets. You're sat next to them. And as things get bigger and bigger and you get more and more remote, you've actually got to find other ways to connect with what is it that's, either making your product, delivering your service, or in your case, out there running with a ball, and actually finding out what does it feel like there? What's the tempo? What are the personalities? What do I need to change because of personalities? And I think when you read a lot about leadership, they tell you there's a methodology. And actually, I think all you're doing when you're leading in any role is managing a bunch of personalities and getting the best out of them. And unless you know them, it's very difficult, I think, to get the best out of people, whether you like them or not, going back to your earlier point.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is not everybody's personalities are going to be conducive to a great relationship in terms of friendship, but that doesn't matter, because if you're able to communicate, you've got respect for each other. And from a playing point of view, if someone's been selected alongside you, then why wouldn't you have respect? Because from an England point of view, they're the best in the country, and from a business point of view, they're there in a job because I'm assuming they've passed an interview and they've been picked to be there. So there'll be some really good, strong attributes. It's just finding how you can work alongside them and get the best out of them, and also them get the best out of you, probably.
Yeah. And are you enjoying it? I mean, it would be not possible for you to go backwards, obviously, but if you could, do you really miss the playing, or are you enjoying the coaching, the developing, the enabling, the facilitating of other people?
I think I'll always miss playing to a certain extent. Whatever it is, I probably need to find a new team sport that will accept older ladies to see what I can find. I think probably my regret around it would be not finishing like on my terms, this wonderful last game and the crowd goes wild and I have the best game of my life and then I walk off the pitch, which obviously never happens to anyone. But I kind of, I haven't played this season. I didn't really sign off last season. I never officially signed off with England. So I finished that Six Nations in 2018 and had ankle reconstruction. And then it took me ages to get back, and mentally I was in a really, really bad place for a number of months, probably years, if I'm completely honest. So I feel like it hasn't been that I haven't closed it properly yet. So maybe, I don't know, maybe there's one last game for me and then then I'll finish, and then I can tell you that I've got no regrets.
Well, I was talking to Frank Bruno, we were in an event together, said, Frank said, still want to get back in the ring. That was a very bad Frank Bruno impersonation.
That was good. I could visualize him.
But he'd still give his eye teeth to be back in the ring. And he's I don't know what he is, mid to late 60s, and it would not be medically wise for him. But I think there is that if you'd competed at that level. But it does sound to me as if you sort of dribbled out rather than went out with a bang. Is there a bang coming?
It's a lovely way of putting it. Maybe there's some talk of some charity games coming up, so that might be my bang, maybe.
Absolutely.
Maybe from my dribble.
Yeah, let's turn the dribble into a bang.
Right, okay, let's do it.
Let's make it happen. I do think there's the way you end something is actually very important. And we talk a lot when we're working with young people in Dallaglio RugbyWorks, but in all charities and schools and people that work with young people about getting the job. And if you think about it, the whole focus is on how you get the job. What skills do you need? What interview do you need? What do you need to wear? What presentation are you going to give? We never actually talk to people about how you leave. And it is quite extraordinary how many people leave badly. And it has a knock-on effect, because there can be a practical knock-on effect. But also from my own lived experience, actually there's an emotional effect if you don't end something well, whether it's a relationship or whether it's a job.
Yeah, definitely. And even if it doesn't end well, so it's not, you don't want to be deselected, you don't want to be injured, or you don't want to be fired, or whatever it may be. It's just knowing that you've closed that off and you're okay with it. You may not agree with it, you may not have wanted it to happen, but to allow yourself to have either the conversations that you need to with people, or get angry for a bit and then calm it down and subside it and reason and put logic into it. But yeah, we talk about it a lot in sport, because you'll have athletes who have done that thing for such a long period of time and there's no plan next. And even though there's a load of really good work going in now for what is next for an athlete, it kind of almost isn't there yet, because you can't replicate that feeling of being in the changing room with each other, of going out to battle metaphorically with those people, and in a truly professional environment that a lot of the boys have lived for a number of years now. How do you get that feeling back of just going and hanging out with your mates every day and getting paid for it? Like, you will never get that again. So it's a really big change, and I think there's still quite a bit of work to be done to support, not just from a financial point of view and helping people get into jobs and what's next, but actually realizing that this is a change and that's okay. You've got to go through the grieving process and live that through the change curve to then go, right, I can move on.
Sounds like there's a business in that. Have you thought about setting up your own business?
I need some help. I need a nice CEO with a love for sea glass.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think you're right, and I think it is emerging. People are understanding that stopping doing something as high performance as being, an athlete and a sports personality is tough. But I'm not sure that there is that much out there to help people, and that means that you're probably getting quite a lot of wasted talent, because grieving is hard, and people don't function well when they grieve, and it takes huge amounts of time and energy. And I think a lot of the time with sports, people don't even name it. Yeah,
and it's not just the kind of coming out the other end, it's the not even making it there in the first place. So the deselections, the going for the job interview that you didn't get, and then people being not able to then keep going, and they give up, whether it's that line of career or that line of sport, because they haven't had the support around them to help them go, do you know what, that's rubbish, but you're better than that, and either go again or let's find something else that will be better fit for you. And I think that missed talent bit, I think I see it a lot in sport where people aren't selected and then that's them gone, and I think, oh my gosh, wasted talent. That always used to be my big kind of bugbear, is someone who had so much talent but then just wasted it, basically, never kind of. And I don't think it's an intentional wasting. I think it's the not knowing how, it's not knowing what that resilience piece is, what are the tools to help me to go, I can go again, or this isn't quite working, but what else can I do?
And what would be your one, when you look inward on yourself, what is that one thing that gave you that resilience? What was the narrative in your head that made you get up and get up and get up?
I think to start with, it was proving people wrong. I think coming into a very male-dominated sport as a player and then also as a coach, it was I'm quite rebellious by nature in there, a little bit of rebellion. And I wanted to show people that, why can't women play this sport? Why can't women be coaching? Right, well, I'm going to show you that I'm going to do a good job, and I can do a good job. I think that was probably my starting point. I think sometimes over the years, I probably lost a little bit of that. And some of that is beaten down through, that whole deselection process that, like we spoke about earlier within elite sport, that you're always being told you've got to be perfect, and that can sometimes knock you down a bit. I think sometimes it turned into, I didn't want to let people down, so kind of, no, I will go again, I will try again, because my family have invested so much time in me, my coach, my physio, whoever that might be, I don't want to let them down, so I'll keep going, or I'll try again.
So both those sort of internal resources, I need this, I'm going to prove this, I can do this, and those sort of balance with that, almost the guilt of people have backed me and I can't let them down. A combination of the both, which
I wouldn't recommend them as coping mechanisms, if I'm completely honest. I struggled a lot over the last couple of years with the guilt about not training enough, guilt about not being in the right place at the time, not being selected, not rehabbing from an injury quick enough, and it was only really probably in the last maybe 2 years that I've fully appreciated what a negative effect that has had on me. And I'm still in the process of trying to get out of that, and it's okay not to go to the gym, and it's okay to have a rest day, and getting the balance now between, I trained because I didn't want to let anyone down, and because I had a list of things that I was supposed to do as my training, and now I need to rewire myself to go, right, what does training look like now? You can't not train, you can't just get rid of all of that feeling of guilt, otherwise you won't train at all. Which I did go through that phase, but it's coming back out the other side to go, right, how do I reframe it now that it's not always driven by guilt, because I've realized what a detrimental effect that's had on my mental health, to be guilting myself constantly.
Absolutely. Do you think that the men, the elite male athletes, the elite players, do you think do they have the same guilt motivation, or is this something that, certainly amongst my friendship group, I would say my female friends are much more guilt aware than my male friends?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's very specific to the individual and what your kind of, maybe your motivations to do what you're doing at the time are. So has it been around, proving people wrong, or just a desire and a drive to do whatever that thing is, whether it's professionally or in sport? We probably, as women, from a societal point of view, have a little bit of a guilt complex, I think. I'm really big on, I don't think men and women are that different, but I think that we've been shaped by society So if you said to me, well, you've got a man and a woman in front of you and you're going to coach them, the person, the rugby player, I think is the same, but all of that background, that experience, that culture, that society stuff is what maybe affects their behavior. But I don't think men and women are fundamentally, obviously they're different, but from a, coaching them as a rugby player point of view, I think it always goes back to that, get to know that person. Just because they're a man doesn't mean that they don't want to talk or ask questions. And just because they're a woman doesn't mean they will always ask you why. You've got female rugby players who don't want to ask any questions. They just want to get out there. They just want to play. Don't tell me anything, just let me go. And equally, you've got male rugby players who want to ask the questions. They want to know why. They want to get, the intricacies of the detail of why we're attacking in a certain way. But I think we just get quite caught up on, well, that's a woman, that's a man, let's treat them, blanket them in this approach. We treat the men like this, we treat the women like this, rather than actually treating them as individuals within those groups.
Absolutely, and certainly when you look at society, it's much more than our gender that defines us. We might be neurodiverse, we might have physical disabilities, we may have had very delayed language, so actually we process things in a different way. We are all very, very different, and that does make the job of a coach very unique, because you have to find the individual, because you can't coach in exactly the same way as teaching a background I'm a little bit more familiar with. You can't teach every child as if they're the same, because they're not. And in a busy class or in a busy training ground, actually finding the way to tailor what you're needing to impart or needing to get out of the individuals in a bespoke way is difficult, but it is what cuts people apart from being magic at it to just being good at it.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, in my role as a coach developer at the minute, we have people coming through some of our award courses, and you stood there saying, it's really tough being a coach. It's really tough. We went through, I was delivering on a course over the weekend, and we're doing stuff around planning and profiling and things like that, and player welfare. And by the end of the day, you're like, yeah, and this is just one day of 4 training days we've got, let alone all the stuff you're doing on field and off field. And it's really hard. And most people are volunteers, and they're also trying to hold down a full-time job, and they might have families and other things going on. And then they step onto the pitch as a coach of whatever that sport is. And it's still a really hard job to do it well. I mean, you can do it, but to really do it well, there's a lot going on, and you're a little bit of everything to everyone. You're the person that's maybe got the knowledge, you're the communicator, you might be the mum or the dad, you might have that kind of social aspect of looking after people, you might be the first aider as well. It's an amazing job, I think, or hobby, if you like, from a volunteer point of view, but it's definitely a tough one,
and one that none of our grassroots sports would survive without.
Completely, yeah. And I think
100% volunteer dependent, and we should never forget that.
Yeah, we do forget, and with referees as well, we get so het up with, well, what's that person doing? What's why are they making those decisions? Well, we say it to our players, well, why did you make that decision there? Why did you choose to kick the ball in that position? We definitely forget that people are humans and people are volunteering their time, and from a coach development point of view, we want to support them to be the best that they can be, whatever that might look like, and to be safe and to look after their players. But ultimately, they're the reason that the sports take place. So without them, we would be absolutely, done in.
We wouldn't have grassroots sports, and therefore we wouldn't have elite sport, because the two are so intrinsically linked. Yeah, exactly. So just to end, what advice would you give to the young people on our programme who've not necessarily had the easiest start? What would be your one piece of advice?
I think a little bit around keep going, but try and find your thing, your purpose. What is it that you love or you're good at? And actually, you don't have to be that good at it, but where do you find joy? What's your thing? And then go and make that happen, because the more you love something from the inside out, the easier it will become. And if you really believe in it, then Doesn't matter how many people tell you no, you just keep telling yourself yes.
Fantastic. And Tamara, I suspect you have kept telling yourself yes. And I also can say with complete confidence, you will be one of those coaches that brings the magic. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.